the Newtown, Connecticut school massacre certainly has hyped up the media a lot recently. A lot of people are trying to figure out exactly why this mysterious young man committed this horrible tragedy. And a lot of people are shifting the blame in a lot of different areas. Some people say it's because of assault weapons. Some people say it's because of psychiatric drugs. And some people say it's because of video games. And today we'll be taking a look at a Fox News report. Now, I'd like to say that this rant actually has nothing to do with Fox News for once. No, it's the person they're interviewing that's going to be the focus of this rant. His name is Lieutenant Dave Grossman. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about him in detail in a bit, but what exactly does he have to say about this incident and how video games are connected? Let's find out.
Cops say he lived in a house filled with guns and in a head filled with games, video games, violent ones apparently, that perhaps could have led Adam Lanza to play. So are today's games training our children to kill? Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman is a former psychology professor from West Point and the author of the book, Killology. Good morning to you.
Yep, that guy right there, Dave Grossman, he's going to be the focus of this rant, not Fox News. Interesting, huh? So, who exactly is Dave Grossman? Well, we all know who Jack Thompson is. Most gamers have heard of him. But surprisingly, I don't think that many gamers know who Dave Grossman is, which is very interesting, because there actually is a strong connection between Jack Thompson and Dave Grossman. And here's the connection. If Jack Thompson was Darth Vader, Dave Grossman would be the Emperor. That's the kind of connection that these two have. And, what exactly is Dave Grossman known for? Well, everyone knows that Jack Thompson is always talking about how video games train you to kill. Well, this guy, Dave Grossman, is the one who came up with this idea that video games train people to kill. He's written a book about it. He's talked about it a lot on the news. He's done several speeches for different colleges talking about this issue. And he's considered to be an expert in this area. But when he wrote his stuff, it was back in 1997 to 1999. And a lot of it has been debunked since then. And a lot of it is basically nothing more than bullshit that's used to fearmonger people into believing that video games are the cause for society's problems, when there actually are greater things infecting our society than video games. But that's who this guy exactly is. And he's probably, in my opinion, even a more nuttier motherfucker than Jack Thompson ever was. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jack Thompson's a lunatic, but this guy, he's a whole new level of crazy. And, be surprised. The things that you hear come out of his mouth will make you go insane. I'm just going insane just by looking at his ugly mug. But let's continue.
Good morning to you. The book is on killing.
On
My
killing.
website is on killing. Yeah, and the website is getbulletproofmind.com.
All right.
And I predicted this, guys. We knew this is coming. The kids who gave us Jonesboro in the middle school, Columbine in the high school, Virginia Tech in the colleges, this generation has given us a movie massacre in Aurora and a massacre in a first grade classroom in Sandy Hook. When are we going to connect the dots on all of this? This is a very sick world where the children play the sickest games and watch the sickest movies and commit the sickest acts we've ever seen in history.
Yeah.
We got to get tired of living in a world where every kid in America practices hunkered out and hiding when the kids come to kill them.
Yeah.
We got to get tired of living in a world
now,
where our cops practice. Yeah,
Colonel.
What exactly have you predicted? That people are playing violent video games and that violent tragedies are going to happen? If you're trying to say that there's some sort of connection between you two, I can tell you right now that that's a bunch of bullshit, because correlation does not equal causation. It just doesn't. I mean, if you look throughout the course of history, some of the most notorious serial killers committed their violent atrocities before the conception of video games. People like Hitler, Stalin, and Jack the Ripper. Video games didn't even exist when they did the terrible things they did. And if you look today at some of our serial killers, people like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Charles Manson, they did horrible things. And they never played video games. I mean, our human history is filled with terrible tragedies of murder and rape and all kinds of debaucheries. And a lot of it has happened before video games ever existed. I mean, video games have only been around for 50 years or so. And yet we've had so many worse violent tragedies going on in this world of ours, besides that have gone on, that eclipse this school shooting. As a terrible tragedy as it is, I mean, nothing could ever could compare to things like the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, the Holocaust. These are some of the worst tragedies human beings have ever committed. and yet video games never existed. I mean, and you're saying we're predicting these things are going to happen? I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're predicting. I mean, if you're really trying to say there's some sort of connection between the two, you're wrong. You are just wrong.
We're looking at one of the video games, and this is one of the most realistic, and this is one of the things that people will say, hey, look, it's just a video game. But unfortunately, when you start early enough, it desensitizes you, and eventually you're just pulling a trigger. It's no longer a game. But, in some cases, and you have detailed it, a lot of gamers have gone on to do some really violent stuff.
Video games are just games. They're nothing more than simple role play. The only way that these games are going to desensitize anybody is if A, they're mentally ill, or B, they weren't properly governed by their parents. And we can't go around blaming society's problems on video games because of the mentally ill or incompetent parents. Because that's just stupid.
Every one of our school killers. There's never been a juvenile mass murder in the schools in human history, and now we've got them everywhere. Across Germany, there were 2 massacres in Germany that beat Columbine all hollow. Finland's had 3. We saw one in Canada. In Belgium, a sicko got in a daycare center with a butcher knife and hacked 12 little babies in the crib. In China, they're coming in with knives into the kindergarten classes and hacking the kids. These crimes have never happened in human history. We feed the sickest movies and the sickest video games. Look, I'm our nation's #1 trainer of law enforcement. I spend more contact hours, more man hours, more time on the road training military and law enforcement than anybody else in America. We know how to use simulators to create the conditions to enable people to kill in combat. The operant conditioning, the classical conditioning, the social learning models, the desensitization, the programming that we put in simulators for cops and military is being done with these video games with these kids.
Right, Colonel.
We got to get mad. We got to get passionate about the schools that refuse to protect our kids. We got to protect our kids like we protect our money. And
Colonel.
Oh my God. Did he say what I thought he said? Did he actually say that tragedies like these school massacres have never happened before in human history? Because if he did, this guy is a supreme idiot who's obviously never read a history book. Allow me to repeat myself. The Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, and the Holocaust, 3 of the worst human tragedies that we as human beings have ever known to exist. Tragedies that are a hell of a lot worse than these school shootings that we've had here in this country. These are terrible tragedies, and they all happened before the conception of video games ever came into someone's mind. How you could say something that incredibly stupid is beyond me. I don't know how to respond to such stupidity. This guy must be fucked up on Quaaludes because that's the only explanation I can come up with to think of how you can say something that stupid. Tragedies like these have never happened before in human history. Oh boy. How anyone can take this man seriously on anything he says after making a statement like that. He must have not been putting a lot of thought into it because it's the only other excuse I could think of. How you could say something that stupid. And another thing. He said, the simulators that we use to teach our soldiers to kill is exactly the same type of technology that we use in these video games. Well, that's a load of bullshit, and I can tell you why. First of all, video games aren't simulators, they're roleplay. Big difference. Second of all, I know people who have been trained to kill, who have used these simulators to learn how to use firearms. And they have all told me that the technology that goes into these simulators is far removed from the technology we put into our video games. It's very, very different. And that picking up a weapon in real life and using it is incredibly different than pushing some buttons and flipping some sticks on a controller. They're 2 totally different things, and one cannot teach the other. So he's just lying about this. And this guy is supposed to be one of our nation's leaders in training law enforcement and military personnel. I wouldn't train this guy to trust this guy to train hunters, to hunt deer for me, let alone teach cops how to use a gun. Of course, considering how badly cops use guns, probably that explains a lot. But we know that video games are far removed from reality and that they're completely different. I mean, this is coming from the mouth of someone who's probably never actually sat down and actually spent a lot of time playing these video games. Because anyone who has will tell you how far removed it is from real life. They will tell you. I will tell you. I've played tons of them. I never picked up a firearm before, but I bet if I did, no. I know if I did, I wouldn't know what to do. I mean, I'm a one-man army in games like Call of Duty, but if you put me out on the real field with an assault rifle, I'll be dead in less than a minute. Oh, it's almost over. Continue.
You made a great
security.
point. You made a great point. You've stated the case. It's obvious that attention needs to be paid to it, but how do we fix it?
I'll tell you what we can do. We can start by not listening to jackasses like this. That's where we can start.
Well, number one, the parents have got to be informed. And, you know, we have laws protecting the kids from guns and pornography and tobacco, alcohol, sex, automobile, firearms. On all these other areas, there are laws that help the parents. As a minimum, parents have to be informed. An M-rated video game is the same as an X-rated movie. M means NC-17. No child under 17 should play this game. If your child is playing M-rated games, time out.
Right.
And you're raising a killer. Not every kid will be a killer, but all the killers played these games, and you may be the first victim, and the blood is on your hands.
Absolutely. And we don't know the connection with this kid and video games, but it's definitely something they're looking at. All right, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, the author of the book On Killing. Sir, thank you very much.
Get bulletproofmind.com. Take a look at it. We're going to make a difference.
Will do. Thank you, Colonel.
All right, where to begin? Ooh, I know where we can begin. First of all, an M-rated game is not the same as an NC-17 rated movie. No, an M-rated game is the same as an R-rated movie, and an AO rated game is the same as an NC-17 movie. Why should we trust anything you say about video games when you can't even get the rating system correctly? And another thing, you believe passing laws will keep these games out of the hands of kids? Yeah, no it won't. The Federal Trade Commission has found that 90% of kids who get their hands on violent video games get them from their parents buying them for them. What laws would prevent that? I'll tell you, none. And a little more thing about laws like this. Laws against things like tobacco, alcohol, pornography, and firearms have been largely inefficient in keeping adult material out of the hands of kids. Almost all the kids I knew in school, including myself, we had access to these things well under the underage, and there was nothing the law could ever do about it. Now, I'm not going to get into great detail about how laws against things like these, how inefficient they are, because that would get off topic of what I'm trying to talk about here, and quite frankly, I want to hurry up and finish this rant. But let's talk about the next thing he talked about, how the majority of people who've done these school massacres have been obsessed with violent video games. That's simply not true. The FBI, the CIA, and the Secret Service have found that only 1 in 4 had a liking in violent video games. This is information you can get straight from the official websites that you can find easily by looking through Google. And here's the thing though. Even if they had played video games, let me tell you something. Playing video games is a popular thing to do nowadays. More than half of Americans do it. So if someone commits a violent crime in this country, the chances that they played a video game are probably going to be pretty high. And when it came to this particular person that committed this horrible tragedy, yeah, he played video games. But you know what he also did? He probably also ate cereal and brushed his teeth with toothpaste. Because that makes just as much sense as blaming it on video games. Correlation is not causation. Now, another thing is the FBI, the CIA, and the Secret Service have all done reports on violent crime in this country. And I found out since the early 1990s, violent crime in this country, especially among our youth, has dropped incredibly. Violent video games right now are more violent than ever before, and yet crime has gone down in this country, especially among our youth. The main target that people are worried about violent video games affecting. It's a shame he didn't mention that, but then again, I don't think it would support his agenda very much, now would it? Didn't think so. Now, the last thing he talked about, which is the area that he kind of got right, but somehow still managed to screw up at the same time, and I don't know how you managed to do this, is he talked about parenting. And he talked about how it's a minority or it's a minimum thing. No, parenting is the majority and is the maximum thing we can be doing here. It's parents not properly governing their kids, teaching their kids the difference between right and wrong and fantasy reality, and allowing them to sit on their asses and play these video games obsessively for hours and hours on end. That's why these kids are being screwed up by violent video games. I do believe violent video games can screw up children, but that factor of how much harm it will do is based upon there's a factor that comes between the violent video games and the children, and that factor is parenting doing their roles as parents, actually governing their kids. That's what's going to help kids be better prepared for the future if parents aren't doing their job. Now, with this particular killer, he was mentally ill, and there's nothing we could have done to prevent that. But with these other kids, if they were properly governed by their parents, they wouldn't have done the things they did. And the fact is that we want to blame society's problems on video games because parents don't want to do their jobs as parents. And with idiots like this that say stupid things like how these school shooting tragedies have never happened before in human history, I just find it to be unbelievable. Anyway, that's all I got to say on this matter. This is Aeecee, signing off.